Well, good afternoon, folks. It's been a while. I noticed that even after my schedule lightening up, I haven't been doing as many videos as I had planned on doing. I'm definitely not back to where I was a couple months ago. And it may fluctuate over the year. But I think the reason I pinpointed the reason is that I'm at home with my daughters all the time. It's summer. I'm not working right now. My wife is working, and I just don't have as much time. I feel like Jeffrey McMahon without kids away. But I'll try to be more consistent as best I can. I've got a couple viewer collection videos coming up. And some other stuff. So this is just going to be a hodgepodge ramble. I'm doing this rather than listening to This American Life, so that's how much I love you guys, because I do enjoy This American Life in general. It's a National Public Radio show for those who don't know of it. Definitely worth checking out. Let's see. Yeah, there's just a few things that I wanted to kind of like ramble on about a little bit. First of all, do not fear the tears. This is actually in response to, let's see, Stuart Lomas has said a couple things, where he basically says he doesn't buy into tear theory or something like that. And he seems to take issue with it, and also actually TGV Tristano over at the Urban Gentry said something to the effect of he was surprised at how obsessed I was with tear theory, considering my otherwise Eastern-oriented philosophy or something like that. I can't exactly remember what he said. It was in the comments. So I wanted to respond to that a little bit because, they're both, Tristano and I, as well as Stuart and I, have similar watch philosophies. We're basically in the same general school of watch collecting. And in a way it's, I'll speak for myself, I won't speak for Stuart or Tristano. But a lot of the reason I went into doing this in the first place was because I had started watching Archie, and I was taking issue with his very narrow perspective on watch collecting, which I found out in many ways is one of the dominant traditional approaches to watch collecting, which is, in a sense, that you first of all, there's a huge emphasis on status and prestige and price and hierarchy. Like the tiers are in a hierarchy. But with Archie, and I think with this sort of quote-unquote orthodox perspective on watches, you pretty much have to learn the ropes of what is true and what isn't true. It's like a worldview, an ideology. And Archie spouts it. The Watch Snob over at AskMen.com spouts it. And a lot of the viewers, a lot of the comments come from people that really have this, you got to work your way up. Anything below a certain price is dog shit. It's not what, and no one ever says this directly, but basically this is the implication. What you care about and what your personal opinion is doesn't matter as much as to what degree you're buying into kind of the horological ideology that's out there. And now whether anyone actually really believes that, it's hard to say. My guess is Paul Pluta doesn't really believe that. But certainly Archie Luxury presents that viewpoint. And a lot of the viewers I've seen, in the different channels, not just mine, not just Archie's, seem to have a really sort of, top-down almost perspective on watches. And, I wanted to, And the tiers, I think Stewart's problem with the tiers is he feels like that supports that perspective. That the tiers, because they emphasize levels, it's like a ladder, and if you're, and if you, as soon as you make the numbers of the tiers, it implies that the higher number is better. You know, that's the way you're ranking it. And the tier system that I use, which has become pretty well used, at least in this corner of YouTube, is this 7-tier system. Now, I didn't create, or first of all, I created the 7 tiers, but I based it upon a few other things. There's a video on it. Just look up 7 tiers in my channel. I think chronocentric.com is one of the main sources of that, but it's also just through observing that you can group watches in sort of price ranges, and each price range or tier has, in general, corresponding levels of quality, certain aspects of the watch. It's just a shorthand grouping so that we know what we're talking about, because there really is a difference between even a tier 2 and a tier 3 watch. Some people might, I mean, I think Archie would say they're both dog shit, so what does it matter? But for those of us who play in those lower levels, quote unquote, there's a real sizable difference, you know, and this is one of the reasons I disagreed with Don Haynes the other day, because he was bagging on the mid-range, and the mid-range is tier 3 basically. It's the 500 to 2,000 or so. And I found that from having owned many tier 2s, a bunch of tier 3s, and several tier 4s, there's real differences between them. And it's not just tier 2 and 3 suck and tier 4 are good, and that's when it starts. Some people view it that way. But there's real differences, and there's subtle differences. And I'm going to do it, at some point I'm going to do a redux, so to speak, video of the 7 tiers, you know, an updated version. But the point of the tiers isn't to say if you own a tier 3 watch, you're better than somebody who owns a tier 2 watch. I mean, that's the last thing you want to do. The point is just to sort of say, well, to be able to look at these sort of levels of watches and see, and to compare across tiers, right? To understand what is the difference between a $200 watch and an $800 watch, a tier 2 and a tier 3 watch. What's the difference between a $1,000 watch and a $3,000 watch? And you can see that across the tiers, that different tiers have these qualities and combinations. But you know, like any categorization, it's just a simplification. It's a shorthand, it's a useful tool, and it's meant to be used as a tool and nothing more. So the tier system, and I would say almost any other watch perspective, they're all secondary perspectives or secondary guidelines. I wouldn't even call them rules. The only rule is what I would call Rule 0. Rule 0 for watch collecting is buy and wear what you like. And really that is all. Like everything else is just subtle variations and personal opinions. And I mean, you could say that's a personal opinion, but in the end, whether you wear Rolex or Patek or Seiko or Invicta, you're still gonna, you should still be buying and wearing what you like. You know, whether you care about what the people in the meeting think about your watch, whether you're wrapped up in that sort of thing or not, you're still gonna buy stuff that you like to wear. You know what I mean? If you think that you have to own some people think that you have to own a Rolex, that if you don't own a Rolex, you're not really a watch, you haven't arrived. Now, you can probably guess what my opinion of that view is. That opinion's dog shit. Now, on a certain level, it's you know, it's true within its own ideology and worldview. You know, just like within the ideology and worldview of fundamentalist jihadist Islam, non-Muslims are heathens and they're bad, right? within that worldview, it makes sense. I disagree with it. I think it's a horrible way of looking at the world. Not Islam in general, but that specific fundamentalism. In a similar, but of course much lesser way, the perspective of you haven't arrived unless you own a Rolex, to me, is just garbage. It's just, I just disagree with it. I think it just doesn't, there's no point to it. It doesn't, if anything, it just, it makes people miserable. To have that kind of viewpoint. It's a similar way that if you don't make 6 figures or whatever it is, you know, that's not what life is about. That's not how happiness, you know, that's not how we become happy. We become, I mean, happiness is, I should do a video on happiness, on how, by the way, I'm really hot and sweaty. I had the AC on. It's been really hot in New England the last few days. And now I'm sitting in my car, arrived at my destination, but I turned off the car and the AC, and I should probably turn it back on. Be a wasteful first worlder here. Anyways, yeah, I'll do a video on happiness. But, you know, a lot of it has to do with doing what you love, right? And spending time with people you love. You know, nourishing relationships, putting relationships and your passions ahead of, say, status and money, right? I'm not saying status and money are a bad thing, and they do lead to certain kinds of happiness, but they don't lead to real deep happiness like truly having a loving relationship does, or engaging in work that you're deeply passionate about. Or if you can't do that, because many of us can't or think they can't, although I think more of us can do it than we think, then at least engaging in work that's somewhat meaningful to you, that puts money in the bank, food on the table, and engaging in hobbies and interests, you know, and making room in your life for the things that you do love. So anyways, rule 0 is really that simple. You know, it's, I don't even think you can refute it logically, that one should, that before anything else, you should buy and wear watches that you like, that you love, right? But then there's all these subtle different variations, and that's where the debate comes, and that's great. But that's rule 0, and that should always be kept in mind. Like, whatever watch, you know, don't buy a $10,000 watch just because you think you're gonna, you know, people are going to be like, ooh, who's that guy? Well, listen, I got to go, and I'll continue the part 2 in a few minutes. All right. And, you know, I mean, it may fluctuate over the year, but I think the reason I pinpointed the reason is that I'm at home with my daughters all the time. It's summer. I'm not working right now. My wife is working, and I just don't have as much time. I feel like Jeffrey missed a few things that I wanted to kind of like ramble on about a little bit. First of all, do not fear the tears. This is actually in response to, let's see, Stuart Lomas has said a couple things. Man, without kids away. But I'll try to be more consistent as best I can. I've got a couple viewer collection videos coming up, and some other stuff. So this is just going to be a hodgepodge ramble. I'm doing this rather than listening to This American Life, so that's how much I love you guys, because I do enjoy This American Life in general. It's a National Public Radio show for those who don't know of it. Definitely worth checking out. Let's see. Yeah, there's... Well, good afternoon, folks. It's been a while. You know, I noticed that even after my schedule lightening up, I haven't been doing as many videos as I had planned on doing. I'm definitely not back to where I was a couple months ago.